Mayor Javi, thanks for coming on the show with me. Now, you're the first, I don't want to call you a politician because I don't think of you as that, but you're the first elected official
Thank you.
that's been on the LFG Energy podcast. And the reason why I wanted to sit down and do this with you was because of your story. And we're going to start there with, which is your humble beginnings, how you grew up. I want you to share that with our audience because a lot of people would think that because of how you grew up, you had no shot at ending up where you're at, or that you maybe had no right to expect the life that you have now. But let's start there.
Well, I can start off by saying that I grew up in a small town, Ceres, California. The town that you see today is not what it reflected 20, 30 years ago. Farm town, you know, agriculture, which it still is today, but there was less buildings around, right? So I went to a small school in the middle of nowhere in the orchards called Westport. And I also lived in a small neighborhood up the street for where we moved when I was 17, Park Lawn. So no sidewalks, right? No direct sewer, and I grew up in a different time. There was some very good moments and some very difficult moments for our family, and I pushed through because I know where my parents came from, and they came from Jalisco, Mexico, and they always instilled those values to me. You have to have hard work and ethic in order to get ahead. Even in those times, the advice wasn't that you need to go to school, go to college. It was you need to get a job. You need to make your hard earned money in order to be successful. And I think that's kind of where my mindset really started on being a business entrepreneur, right? I remember one day I took a bunch of things out of my room and I had a yard sale in the front of the house and my mom got upset and she pulled me to the side. I said, "You're selling things that are not yours." I looked at her and said, "You're absolutely right." So I took everything back inside. Right? A valuable lesson as a young teenager. And growing up in a neighborhood with no sidewalks, you kind of have a different perspective at life. And it wasn't until I was about 17 years old that my parents told me that we were gonna move to a new place. And at first, I was reluctant. I was telling myself, "Well, I'm gonna leave the neighborhood that I grew up in to a different neighborhood, and maybe I might not see my friends." But we didn't move as far as I thought we were going to move, so we found a home literally a mile up the road. So think about this for a second. Growing up in Park Lawn with no sidewalks, moving to a new developed neighborhood a mile up the road with sidewalks, changed my perspective on how I think and what I wanted to do with my life.
Why why was the sidewalk so prominent in your memory? Because even as you're sharing it, I can see like there's this energy that kind of comes
Yeah.
about. But talk to me more about the actual sidewalk and its significance.
I think a lot of it has to do with, growing up in a neighborhood with the exceptions that you will never succeed or get out of something that you felt you could never leave.
Mm,
Right. And the only thing I ever thought of doing at that time was, starting my own business. But where would I get the money from? Again, I was, 15, 16 years old. I used to work with my father, um, and he would do side work and do yards. And we used to work for this lady that lived down the street from our house who was a dispatcher for the Ceres Police Department. So as I got older, I started seeing different environments and I got to, help her with her yard, but I also saw a lot of law enforcement officers at the house and I would meet these guys. Kind of gave me a different perspective, right?
hmm
So slowly but surely, small things started kind of changing my thought process. And, and in that neighborhood, comparable today, as I coach football, we talked about this, and I go back to that neighborhood where some of my kids live, and I tell them I grew up in this neighborhood. They look at me like, "Coach, there's no way you grew up in this neighborhood." And I said, "Yeah." So let me take you to my aunt's house. Let me show you where I lived. And then, "Oh, that's my friend's house. Well, I used to live there." And they're kind of just blown away because they see me as a mayor now.
Right.
So some of them don't know my story.
hmm
And some of those kids are what we consider under the poverty line,
Yeah.
right? And that's what it really comes down to when I talk about these things.
For those kids that you've been around, and even people who listen to this, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this. Many of them didn't go to college,
Right.
and they've created successful lives and successful businesses and have an impact. Conversely, a lot of people who did go to college and they're not doing anything.
Oh yeah.
And there's a big attack on colleges now in kind of in the public discourse or dialogue about, it's not needed and whatever. Talk to me about, or talk to, people that are listening to this that maybe like, I didn't go to college, so I may not have a shot at life.
Well, I mean,
I may not, I
I
can't.
can't say that I didn't take an attempt at college.
Mhm.
I did go to MJC for a while.
Sure.
This was a little bit after high school, probably in the middle of my career in fire industry. So before we get into that, so when I turned 18 and I was living up the road, my neighbor um, offered me a job, 18, 19 years old. And he told me that, we just got rid of someone. Would you like a job? That should have been a fair warning, right? They got rid of someone. That's my
Mhm.
joke. I spent almost 19 years there as a fire technician. I specialized in fire suppression. I was a programmer and I traveled up and down California. That was a really defining moment of my character, which allowed me to go outside the city of Ceres,
Mhm.
out into Los Angeles Bay Area, right into entrepreneurs, business owners that owned huge corporations. I got to be inside of data centers that were top secret that nobody else had access to, and work for the federal government, have contracts with them. That really opened up my eyes. Um, so those are the kind of the things that kind of built my character, right?
Mhm.
So with those few pointers, and I told myself, can I go back to college? But here's the kicker: it wasn't the career that I was in that I wanted to pursue. I wanted to pursue law enforcement.
Mm.
So this is something that kind of led to where I'm at today. Um, and the world was different during those times. The only access we had to communications was either television, newspaper, radio. Okay. So any information that we wanted to look for, we had to really dig deep to find, and or books. So I wanted to pursue a career in law enforcement because I wanted to kind of just change the trajectory of what I was doing, and I wanted to give back to the community. Um, and the only reason why I didn't follow through was because I was still in the fire industry, working full time. And in order for me to go to school full time, I would have to give that up.
Mm.
And that was not an option. I had to make money.
Right.
So I think, like I always say, God has a plan bigger than yours. It didn't work out in many ways. And now you see that I ran for office and won twice.
Right.
And I'm a big avid supporter of law enforcement
Mhm.
for those very reasons.
Yes.
I have friends, family members that are in law enforcement. Now being the mayor, now almost 4.25 years, I have a better understanding on how law enforcement works from the inside, on the government side.
You talk about law in services, and you mentioned firefighting.
Yeah.
Now, I know
Fire technician, everybody
fire
always,
technician,
yeah,
but if I pivot to firefighter, that is a word or a title that's kind of synonymous with your results as a mayor because you are a firefighter, puts out fires, solves
oh,
problems, and you are known for that. That's what
yeah,
you're really known for in amongst the city council and your constituents is that he solves problems.
right,
Was that a mindset that you came to with? Because I think this applies to business. If you're
yeah,
leading an organization or you're running a team, you're running a company, whether you're a solopreneur or what, like you got to be in the business of solving problems, not just talking talk, but
yeah.
getting results.
Many challenges that I face as a technician was a solving problem game. I was
Mhm.
really good at troubleshooting. I love going out there and you give me issues, and I would go out there and chase them. And there was times where we were chasing down issues that took us 3 4 weeks to find. And I love doing that. And then also being on call, every 3 or 4 weeks, I was talking to people all the time. People would call me, or customers would call me, and it came to a point where some customers would only want to work with me. So even if I wasn't on call, they would call me. Javier, I need you to be at this site in 30. I'll be there in 30 minutes. And I just throw on my pants and go,
Mm.
because they knew that I was dependable. So when you talk about putting out fires, no pun intended, I spend a lot of my time putting out fires. A lot of people don't understand that, they think it's a part-time job being a mayor, but it's really not. And even council members that do have full-time jobs, and I understand that it's difficult for them to sometimes for attending events and other different things. But in my position as a full-time elected official, and also having my own business. The real freedom comes because in 2020, I stepped away from my career. I left a job that my income was really good.
Mhm.
And I decided to dedicate all my time to doing this because it's not easy. You can talk to any mayor in our county, and we have these discussions all the time. But we do know that it takes a lot, and putting out fires is just a part of the job. Having conversations with people that want to build in our community, people with small issues. You can resolve issues sometimes without bringing them to city council, right?
Mhm.
So I spent the majority of my day putting out fires on the phone, and I know that some people who ever spent a day with me are surprised. Like this is what you do all day. Yeah, this is what I do. I love it though. That's the thing. There's no way. I think that there's no way that you could be in office, not love the job that you do, still want to be here, especially with the climate of today.
Mhm.
Right? There's a high expectation of elected officials nowadays. You have to be respectful. You have to, have common sense. You have to fall within the rules that are given to you as an elected official. No egos, no power trips. And then I think that's something that I stick to
Yeah.
because I know that I met politicians that I can say are crooked,
Sure.
and it's mind blowing.
Right. And or there's just, they're led by and really driven, unfortunately, by the ego.
Yeah,
You mentioned ego. And I want to talk about that because there's this fine line with being confident and self-assured, where if it crosses over, and again, it's rooted in ego
yeah,
or the lack of control of it, checking your ego, where it's like arrogant and almost condescending. And there's a big difference between that. You've managed, from everyone that knows you, to toe that line very carefully and not cross over. People think of Javi as a leader, but he's not driven by his ego. Talk to me about how important that is, whether you acknowledge this or it's just happened naturally or if it's something you really have to work at. Because I think all business leaders and people that listen to this podcast, that's something that we all need to be reminded of.
I really would like to say that as a person and you grow up and you think about those kind of things, you don't confuse ego with confidence.
Mhm.
Without my failures, I wouldn't be where I am at today. Till this day, I make mistakes,
Right.
but you have to have the confidence and the drive to do this job, or else I wouldn't have any respect and or confidence in anyone who decides to be in this position. I think that's one of the reasons why people continue to, vote me back in. Because I mean, there's an old saying that we as quick as we can vote you in, we can vote you out,
Hmm.
right? But they don't want somebody who is reluctant. I can say this in a way where it doesn't. I don't want it to come across egotistic, but you don't want weak leaders,
No.
right? And I'm also very humanizing, right? If you really know me, you know that I'm a very caring person. I'll take the shirt off my back for you,
Yeah.
and that's I've always been that way. And sacrifice is important, right? And as a football coach, I see this all the time with these young kids. They're growing up and they're seeing certain things that are happening in their life, and sometimes we're more than just coaches.
Well,
Family.
yes.
Sometimes the difference between showing up to practice and being a part of big family is the difference between them, and whatever's happening at home,
Yeah.
right? So that starts, really building on you. So it builds character in my sense. I can tell you that, as a coach, and I've been doing this almost 10 years, that the coach Javi that started uh, day one is a totally different coach now.
Yeah. One thing on coaching, and you said this and it reminded me because there was a piece I had spoken about how important it is for us to learn our learners and having a coaching philosophy. And this applies in business. If you head up a team or an organization, it's not a one size fits all approach.
Yeah,
You got to learn the response patterns of what triggers that person
correct.
and this one instead of just having an equal voice. Same thing for coaching. There's kids that have a different response pattern based on what's
Yeah,
going on in that kid's life in its home versus another kid who might have a totally opposite set of
yeah,
circumstances. That when it comes to leadership, business is one thing, but what leadership at the public level, how important is that for you to understand how to get the most out of your city councilmen and women and the other elected officials that you have to work with.
So you have to have the ability to um, pay attention to body language,
Hmm.
pay attention to the words that people are saying,
Okay.
what they're trying to project. And I'll give you an example. No, growing up, you always tell yourself, "Oh, I think I'm good at, figuring people out."
Hmm.
Right. And I actually took a larger step. My wife approached me with this book, and this book really talked about people's body languages, different personalities. And so I took a test,
Okay.
right? And it actually described the kind of person that I am. I'm a Libra, you know, and so I seek a balance. Anytime that you see me making a decision,
Yeah.
I'm looking at what the outcome will look like, depending on how much weight is on one or the other side. Trying to understand people's personalities will help you and guide you in being successful. You're going to have a group of 10 people with the same goal, but you'll get to that goal in a different way. But you have to navigate every person's personality because you might have two people that drag the entire team down, and you have two people that are leading the team. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions.
Right.
Those two people that are dragging that team down are going to have to go for the overall goal. So understanding people is something that I think has really helped me in my position. It's helped me as a coach, trying to figure out these young kids who are, only 14, 13 years old, and they're navigating everything, trying to figure out, how to how to read plays.
Right.
They don't know where to go. We have to figure out who are the ones that will have the ability to be successful, and try to coach them up as best as possible.
And you feel like, I mean, this obviously applies again to the business world. So for
Yeah.
anyone listening, if you're leading a group, you have a team, or you're just, you're solo, but you have to interact with other people on a regular basis, the same people, certain things. It's important to hear here what Mayor Javi's saying and have that understanding of people around you, recognizing body language,
Yeah.
response patterns, and things. If you want to ultimately get what you want and have an impact and serve properly, then I think this is paramount. It's not a one size fits all.
No, but you also have to understand that, as a leader,
Mm.
you're only as good as your team.
Yes.
Okay. So, being the mayor of the city of Ceres, I get the opportunity to appoint a vice mayor. That's your team right there, right? So in the essence of government on how it works, we have some rules are called Robert Rules of Order,
Yes.
right? And then we have the Browns Act, right? You can only talk to another council member about items that are on the agenda. So my vice mayor is my go-to person. I've had 3 vice mayors since I've been elected,
Mm.
and those vice mayors get to see more broad of what's happening in the city of Ceres because I deal with more than maybe some council members deal with. But I'm only as good as the strengths of everyone on my council.
Right.
So there is some council members that are very, very good at certain things, right? And I want to be dependent on their knowledge on certain items.
Sure.
You ever have, like, for example, my knowledge would be business, would be fire. It's a small example. So if we have something coming to the agenda that has anything to do with fire, I'll be able to use some of my experience,
Right.
based on the report and what I'm reading and the decision I have to make. You could do that with your team. So now this is one thing I'll tell people: if you want to be a successful leader, you have to make sure that you have the right team. You can be dependent on those persons, and sometimes you can accomplish things more with the team than you can on your own. Like, for example, I as a mayor, I don't have a person that is my secretary because of the way our city is structured.
Right.
Larger cities, they have an assistant,
Right.
right? And you can accomplish a little bit more with an assistant, right? Um, and then, like, on the campaign side, I have an extraordinary team, and I don't have to do certain things on my own, and I have a team that's helped me and guided me. But at the end of the day, I'm still the mayor of the city of Ceres. I'm still the leader, and people look up to me. And it's a huge responsibility.
Mm.
But, with that, my second piece of advice I would give people is in leadership, in business, or in anything, is you have to be able to have the ability to take constructive criticism.
Mm.
And sometimes the ones that are giving you the most constructive criticisms are the ones that care about you the most.
Sure.
And if they're not giving you any criticism, it's because they want you to fail.
Or they're giving up on you.
Yeah.
Don't care, right? And in the on the topic of failure, you just said that word, and I wanted to ask about this because people, now that you told us a little bit about your story, we know that it was humble beginnings.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of work ethic and drive and relentless spirit to get you to where you're at. But how important has failure been in your life? And can you give me an example of something recently
Okay.
that Mayor Javi failed at or fell short, or you were very disappointed in the result, and you're using it as something, or you're reframing it as a way of moving forward or using it as fuel? Because that's what LFG energy is. It's not perfect. In fact, it's very imperfect, but it's taking those losses and those failures and those setbacks and turning them into some kind of gold.
Maybe not something necessarily recent, but I'm 41 years old,
The young man.
and thank you. Yes. And the reason why I say that is because the 20-year-old Javi was not the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And neither was the 15-year-old Javi. All those mistakes that I made and all those failures built my character to try to not repeat history. So I do spend a lot of time trying to avoid making mistakes. Um, and you can even say that in relationships, right?
Sure.
Um, and saying that I have made any mistakes in my relationship, but being humbled in saying that, okay, maybe I'm wrong about something. And especially when you're married,
Yeah. Better get used to
saying
saying it.
happy wife is happy life. Let me tell you something. Yeah. And that took me a long time to realize that. Then my father used to tell me that all the time. And I just
You didn't get
thought
it.
he was just crazy. But he was right.
Turns out he was a genius.
Yeah, he's a genius. So if we want to talk about like micro failures,
Yeah.
that's everyday life.
Sure.
I mean,
And you don't call it a bad day,
Yeah,
right?
you can call it a bad day.
No, but you don't necessarily call it a bad day in the negative sense of where you're like, wow, this day was a waste. We had a few. I mean, like,
Yeah.
if there's micro failures along the way, that's kind of part of the day.
Maybe there's something to say about as you start trying to figure out yourself
Mm-hmm.
that you don't harp or you let those small failures affect you as much as they used to
Sure.
when you were younger.
They don't define you.
Yeah, they sure as heck don't define you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sit here and define someone who I coached when he was 14 years old and now he's a grown man and define him on his failures on the football field.
No.
No, no, no. But you have to, you most definitely do have to acknowledge certain things. And I'm trying really hard um, to point out any failures that I've went through. But okay, I'll start with one. When I first ran for office, you know, I've always been into politics. I didn't do as much research as I should have done on what position as the mayor entailed. Okay, because of my ambition to run for office and what it took to win for office and along the sides of running a campaign. So when I first ran for office, I only raised $3,500, rough. Maybe it was 2,700, something along those lines. I spent a lot of time watching other elected officials how they ran their meetings, but what I didn't know is what would happen in the background, all the other jobs that you had to take on as an elected official, all the committees you were going to be put on, working with staff and all those
There's
different
a lot
things.
more to it.
There was a lot more to it. So I looked at it more for the campaign side, right? What are things that I want to accomplish as mayor, which I've accomplished a lot. Um, this time around, when I ran for office, the second time, we raised a whole lot more money, and I understood the value of that. But also, this time I ran with experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the mistakes that I made when I first ran versus the second time, I told myself, I will not, I will not do. And I think that goes to running a business, right? So I'll give you an example of where I kind of see myself in my business. So if I wasn't the mayor, I could put more attention to my business. Okay. And my business is a gym. Okay. And we have a great concept. We're open 24/7, remote access. We have an app, and there's really no employees at that gym, just the person who cleans. And sometimes that'd be me, but we had just recently hired someone. If I had more time to focus on my business will be exactly where I want it to be.
Mhm.
So right now, my business is not where I want it to be. But see, here's a catch 20. I want to put more into what I'm doing as the mayor because of the level of importance.
Right.
I'm not saying my business is not important. I
Sure.
do have a business partner.
It's a different priority, right?
It's a different priority. And if I wasn't the mayor, I probably do exactly what I set out to do, and I would probably have 3, 4 gyms.
Mhm.
You know, and quantity is not always quality.
No.
So we have one, and it's the original one and the only one that we have. But that's another form of saying that there are some things that I could have done better
Mhm.
to elevate my business. But that's why I try to tell people, don't necessarily put all eggs in one basket and expect them all to equally be the same.
Right.
Right. And I can tell you right now, I wake up, the first thing I think of is I got to check my emails, before I go to bed. I'm checking Facebook to see if anybody made a comment or a post about an issue in the city, because I'm not always on Facebook.
Right.
And that's just a clear example of, as a business owner, if you want to be successful, you have to put everything in. And there is a difference between being employed for an employer and being a business owner.
Yes.
You as an employee, you can check out at the end of the day.
Totally.
Being a business owner, that's your business 24/7.
24/7. And
Being
it's
being the mayor is 24/7.
yeah.
And this is casual joke here. I wake up in the morning. Sometimes I forget I'm the mayor because I got to get ready. I got to do other things. And the reason I say that is because, sometimes I'm just a regular Javier Lopez, right?
Yeah.
I'm the guy that gets up and makes a breakfast sandwich, makes my coffee, jumps in the car, go to football practice at 7 a.m. just like everybody else. Stand in the heat at 3:45 p.m. with
Nice.
everybody else.
Yep.
Right. I get ready to go to this podcast, and we have a fundraiser after this, and I had to get ready. I had to prepare myself, and you're always running and gunning. But I think that when people look at people like me and you, and they see what they see as success, it does take a lot of hard work and dedication.
Yeah.
You cannot half-ass this. Yeah.
There's a lot of titles,
Yeah.
that you wear, like serviceman, coach, mayor, uh, the relatable guy, community builder,
Yeah.
firefighter, problem solver, business owner, husband. You know, is there a title that matters more to you, or are they all equally important in their
Uh,
own way?
I say being a husband is important because if I don't have a stable home, there is no Mayor Javier Lopez.
That's right. What's your wife's name?
My wife is Stefania Lopez.
Stephania. That one was for you, right? If you're listening to this, just remember that on Father's
Yeah.
Day and on your anniversary, and the next time he says the wrong thing.
I can tell you that, for anybody who is in public service, or anything like that, when I talk to other elected officials, we spend a lot of time talking about our family.
Yeah.
We'll talk to mayors, and they'll talk about their grandchildren, and obviously they're way older than I am, right? So, oh, you got grandchildren? Okay. Or we'll talk to others that have had careers in sports, and they're telling me about things that they've done, and they're always asking about what I'm doing, and that kind of gets us in that mode of like, we're normal people, but then right when that gavel hits, it's time for business.
Yep.
And I think that's the expectation everybody should have of us. That when it comes to business, that we're not joking around. We're here to conduct the business of the people.
Yes. And again, tying it back to business, like for anybody, again, listening to this who's a business owner, like recognize you got to get stuff done.
No,
There's a big difference between being busy and productive and effective. I
Yeah.
should say busy and effective. A lot of people just keep busy all day,
no.
but they're not being effective.
You have to realize that I didn't get here by being someone who is just playing games all day. If that makes any sense, I take a lot of pride in the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody who knows me knows that I'm a serious person when it comes to business,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
So in my business and in coaching, and as an elected official, there's items that come before us that are very difficult
Yeah.
things to deal with, and that's why when I look at what's happening in the world right now, I sometimes ask myself, what would I do in that situation, right? And my biggest joke is like, I feel comfortable where I am, even though I am running for Congress, and that's going to be a huge undertaking. But the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to have the ability to have a voice at the table as how I felt that I didn't have before I ran for mayor during COVID. And there's a lot of people out there who are dependent on government to make decisions for them, even though sometimes government doesn't make the right decisions for them. And what you see happening in the world right now is you see governments making decisions for their own purposes and realizing that there's people out there who just want to have the ability to put food on their table, afford gas in their car, take their kids to school, and live a life and have grandchildren, like I said earlier. And sometimes these government officials here in the United States, other countries, are really just focused on their end goal. But there's also the side of me that says that I have the obligation to protect and serve. When I took the oath, it meant something to me.
Mhm.
So while you may see that some people are making these very tough decisions that maybe you don't want to be involved, or you see that maybe they shouldn't, you have to also look at the things that they might have been faced with or put in front of them to get to that decision.
Right.
And if we don't have a strong country, we won't have a country at all.
That's right.
And you want strong leaders.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that I really take serious, because I don't want people to think that I'm someone who's a pushover or someone that will take things lightly.
Yeah.
I'm a very serious person when we have to be. But when we don't have to be, catch me on the football field.
Respect, man. Respect. There's a lot of pride in your voice and even in your body language, uh, as you were saying all that. And I think even for those of us in business and real estate, any craft, you
Yeah.
got to have pride in what you're doing, pride in your craft, pride in your community, pride in yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I feel like that's a big takeaway here in this talk is that at the core of it all, there has to be that. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to be effective, to be authentic, to be
Yeah.
genuine for the people that you serve and care about. Javi, one of the last questions I always ask every guest this, and
Yeah.
it's a totally open answer. So there's no
Okay.
right or wrong answer. And you'll like it because you're a football coach and you can curse here if you like. So it's good. But LFG Energy, which is the name of the podcast and the theme, it means different things to different people.
Okay.
What does LFG Energy defined by Javi, Coach Javi mean?
The pivotal moment when you win that game and everything that you put into blood, sweat, and tears, and you win, let's fucking go. That's what I think of when I saw the first time I ever saw the phrase. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah,
This
it
is,
evokes something, doesn't it?
it does. It does. It gives you that, like, okay, let's go. Because there's nothing like putting everything into something and being the winner.
That's
Don't
right.
face a loser.
That's
The
right.
winners get to tell the story,
Okay.
and that's exactly what I see. I actually have your hat in my office, the mayor's office. People always go, "What is LFG?" I was like,
What you think it means?
"What do you think it is?" Yeah. Hey,
All right. So that's what it means to Coach Lopez. What does LFG Energy mean to Mayor Lopez?
oh, well, hey, you know, because I am one and the same, it's every single time that the city of Ceres makes a successful move in the right direction under our leadership, and I leave that city council meeting with a smile on my face. Like, we did something that when I'm dead and gone will benefit those young people that live in the city of Ceres.
That's it.
Let's go.
Let's fucking go,
Yeah.
Saints. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's how exactly the sentiment that I feel. And we have most definitely done a lot of things in the last 4 years that, I feel that, in cold heartedly in my heart that it needed to be done.
Hmm. Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of the busy campaign. I mean, though it's early, but you've got a lot of things going on. But I'll say this as we wrap up: there's a lot of people that serve in office or for in their communities because it's all about them.
Mhm.
And it's very clear, and I knew this when I met you, a little over a year ago, that for you, it's all about all the other people. That's why I said, it's so unique that you wear all these different hats or titles, but the common thread or the common denominator in all those titles is it's about what does Javi do for all of them? What does Javi do for those athletes? What does Javi do for his city? What does Javi do for his community? What does Javi do
Right.
for his family? You're always doing it for other people. So I commend you on that, brother, because
Thank you.
the world needs more leaders like you. I wish you the absolute best in this congressional run that you're making, which is a historic one. I think your story is incredible. And for all of those listening, just always remember that Tony Robbins line: your biography does not have to be your destiny. And if anyone is a testament to that, so many people are, of course, but my guest here on the show today is definitely that. From his humble beginnings
Uh-huh.
to what he keeps doing, what he keeps impacting. You know this guy, he doesn't take shit from anyone. So he's gonna make things happen and keep delivering results. So God bless you, brother. I wish you the
Thank you.
absolute best. Thanks for being on the show. And like I said earlier, let's fucking go series.
Oh, I really do appreciate it. And I know that we're on our way out here, but I will tell you that my goal at the end of the day is going to be doing what I think is best for the Central Valley. At the end, I always feel this cool heartedly. This is our valley. We have to take care of it for every single person, no matter what side you lie on.
That's the man. Let's go.
Let's go.